my thoughts and in my dreams. They're always in my mind. These songs of hobbits, dwarves and men, and elves, come close your eyes. You can see them too.
If you ask most of the hardcore role-playing game nerds out there, they pretty much all hate Dungeons & Dragons 3rd edition and 4th edition, which 3rd edition changed virtually everything, or at least everything that was iconic of the old school D&D. You know, you'll notice that saving throws are completely different, attribute checks completely different. You don't roll strength checks the way you used to. No THAC0, of course. And I think mainly they didn't like having to buy an all-new set of books, because we've got all these books here, and, well, it's starting over. And, you know, especially the kind of guy like me we're obsessive about buying new books. So, of course, we're going to buy them, and we're like, fuck. So, and also the settings. It also means the settings are due for, like, an update. And we like the settings. Even if we hate them, we like the way they are, because we know them. And so, especially 4th edition, Forgotten Realms, I don't like Forgotten Realms, I never did. It was one of those very comic booky settings, where everything was very high magic, everything was very high powered, and it was also one of those things where there were a ton of, I don't know if Mary Sue is the appropriate term to use, but a lot of established properties had major characters, literary characters, like Drizzt Do'Urden and Elminster, like the most powerful mage in the history of ever. And, you know, the various council dudes, and it always raised the question, like, why, you know, if there's these huge world-threatening problems, why doesn't Elminster just deal with it? And that's just kind of the question, like, do you want to play D&D or not? So, and in a few cases, Elminster, there's either a reason he doesn't do it, or he's the one who hires you, so he can deal with it, or whatever. And I believe, I haven't read a whole lot, because 4th edition Forgotten Realms pissed the hell out of me, but I'll get to that in a second. Essentially, like, Elminster had kind of a fuck buddy called, I think it was the Symbol, and the Symbol is like the goddess who runs magic, and so him and her just kind of shacking it up and doing the wild thing. So I think she dies, and this drives him essentially apeshit. I think magic is somewhat corrupted, and he just goes nutty. So yeah, he's not much of a help anymore, and that's another case of they always stat Elminster in every one of the books, and he's got this absurd number of, like, feats and levels, because of course he's like above 20th level. He's fucking epic level. He's virtually a demigod. So, you know, he's always statted, and everyone's like, well, one of us has to. They always want to try to take him, especially if they're playing, like, evil characters. I hear less about taking on Elminster than most, but I do know he's been taken on. And then what really pissed me off about 4th edition Forgotten Realms is they really clumsily, 4th edition introduced a bunch of new races that they were very, very proud of. The Dragonborn, for one. It was essentially like big characters who were like half dragon, half human. So they're big, scaly horn dudes who are these very not aristocratic, but like noble, honor-bound warriors, like almost like Klingons, but not quite as belligerent. So you had these Dragonborn, and you had like Warforged and Tieflings, or Tieflings, however you want to say it, that spontaneously just appear. And these I always say Tieflings. These Tieflings are really, again, fundamentally different from the way they used to be. Whereas Tieflings, you used to see them a lot in Planescape. Tieflings were literally half human, half demon, the result of a guy getting, or a girl, usually, whatever, human demon. So, Tieflings in this case are kind of the result of a bloodline that it kind of started way back, and so it's like this bloodline has demon blood in it, and that's just the way you go. And so they have to do that. They had to, like, really just do a bunch of hand waving on how these characters showed up, you know, because now Dragonborn are here, and now Tieflings are here, and all sorts of races, and you just like, and there's elves and then there's elves and there's super elves, the Eladrin, who come from the Feywild. And of course the Feywild and didn't used to exist, or at least not to the same degree it used to. Like there's the Shadow Realm and the Feywild and stuff like that. And so we've got all these really huge changes in Pantheon's ethos, dimension, the organization of the dimensions. Planescape out. Planescape still kind of exists, but not on the same level nearly as it used to, because 4th edition also streamlined alignments. They took out the law to chaos, good to evil. Now I think it's basically like good, neutral, bad. With like it was really stripped down. They took out a bunch of this stuff, and so when you take out like half the alignments, this is meaningless. So they pared it down to really just kind of black and white notions of good and evil, or just like law based, like just very strict law. So they did this thing where I think like an asteroid hits. When we bring up an asteroid hitting, it's going to be really fucking stupid. But an asteroid hits Farron, the main continent, and it fucks everything up. And essentially, I believe what happens is it causes like a interdimensional rift between like parallel dimensions, and they kind of crash into one another. And so all of a sudden, there's just Dragonborn, there's just this race of Tieflings, and there's Eladrin, there's the Feywild. And so like you really got to wonder what it's like being in Farron. All of a sudden your entire theology has just been retconned. Not retconned in the sense that everything used to be this way and now it is, but retcon being this never happened. Now it's like it used to be this way and now it's completely different. So like being a spiritual person in Farron must be this really roller coaster, frustrating ordeal. Like, oh, my god stopped existing. Oh crap, because I don't worship the same, like the alignment my god was part of. A lot of the gods vanished. A lot of gods either died off or vanished or kind of merged. It was just like it could have stayed that way. It could have stayed the way it was before, but no, they had to put out a new edition. They also had to do this. They put out this big contest one time to develop the new grand setting for Forgotten Realm, or for D&D, and it was called Eberron, which was, I don't want to say steampunk, but kind of a little bit steampunky. That was kind of like this magical hybrid with mechanics that introduced the Warforged, which are kind of like these like robot dudes that you could play. I don't remember anyone really playing Eberron except if you played D&D online, which was no choice, but you had to play Eberron. I know some people did it, but I can't. The entire time I worked at the game store, nobody even bought Eberron. They bought the first book maybe, and they looked it over there. This sucks, and they put it away. And really, it didn't suck. It didn't really suck, but it was just like, why? We just didn't like it. So Forgotten Realms radically changed. Also, the one cool thing I did like was, it was a big change in the sense that it threw things out of their status quo, like politically, and it changed a lot of things. It caused a lot of problems that were ripe for adventure opportunities. So like it basically opened this huge breach in the Underdark, which is where all the bad things live. It's where the Drow live. So like all sorts of problems kind of billow up from the Underdark. And so, the political landscape changes, borders have changed, and so a lot of countries now seek this opportunity to invade one another. And so I liked that, but what I didn't like was everything else, like, dimensions, gods, alignments, everything is just radically changed. Dimensional travel is completely fucked. So if you like Planescape, you're just done. It's no good. And it was terrible. So there was good and there was bad, but you couldn't really take half of it and leave the other half out. Because you couldn't just, I guess you could house rule it and say, but so much of the history and the campaign has changed. You can't leave races out. So I made my own setting, homebrew, which I rather liked a lot. That incorporated this, and I think better explained. It was just leave Forgotten Realms alone or end it. And I guess the outcry would have been much worse if they just ended it. But I guess they had to keep on going with the RPGA, the organized play. I don't know. It's complicated, and I know they had to change some stuff, and I know they wanted to bring new stuff in, but it's different, and I don't like things that are different. So, third edition in particular was kind of, I don't want to say universally hated, but among the big nerds like me, we hated third edition. And what was funny was we always played it. We played the hell out of it, and the reason was, you see, I've got all these books here. I've got a room full of books over there. I've got games I'll never play, like fucking. This is a bad example because I know people have played this, but like Midnight. Midnight's a good game. It's really depressing, but it's a good game. I'll never get to play this fucking game. I played it one time actually. There was the guy I used to play with. He got me into this, and we played a few sessions of it, and then things fell through. It wasn't like hostile. We just like probably ended exactly this way. So like we'll get a group together and be like, what do you want to play? And so a guy like me will be like Midnight or Spycraft or GURPS is again bad example. More people play GURPS than they used to, but not a lot. Iron Kingdom, Seventh Sea, even World of Darkness. I used to notice didn't. What would happen was there'd be like 2 players out of 6 who would say like, or 3 or 4 even, like Midnight. I was the only guy who fucking had this game, so I'd say let's play Midnight, and everyone would go, I don't have that, and you don't want to make somebody buy a game so you can play it, because it's just like, I want to. You're not going to make people do it, and so you'll list off like 4 or 5 games that are not standard, because it always starts out like, well, let's play something other than D&D, and we list off all these games, and the either half or the majority of people don't have it. So it's kind of like you could borrow books, but it just, for some reason, the group always just kind of gets frustrated after naming like 3 or 4 games, and they just go, let's play D&D instead, because we all know that this is like D&D. It's medieval heroes and shit, and so they just go like, well, if it's like D&D, let's just play D&D instead. I don't want to learn, like, besides, people got lives, they got jobs, they got school, they don't want to read another fucking book. Like, this is fucking huge. It's not even that big considering some of the books I read, but they're like, I just don't want to read this. I don't want to learn a new game. Although this is D20, this would be easier to learn than some, but you know what I mean. So, like, if you got 7th Sea or Legend of the Five Rings or something, good game. They're like, oh fuck, I don't want to read a new game. So you just go, well, let's play D&D instead. So you'd always got stuck with it, and we always got stuck playing 3rd edition. We hated it, but everyone had it, which was kind of this really unfortunate effect. I have seriously played enough 3rd edition to last me forever. Which is funny because my favorite game right now is Pathfinder, which is 3rd edition if it were fixed. It's so much fun, and it's 3rd edition, but it's almost unrecognizable as 3rd edition because it's good. So I wasn't even that big on slagging 3rd edition. A lot of people were just diehard haters of it, and I've become one. But at the time, I just didn't like it, and I guess I could get into why 3rd edition in particular was really bad. But that's not what I'm trying to focus on. Although, tangent. Midnight, if you want to know what the deal with this is, I have no idea if there's been any new editions. This is the 2nd edition. Without getting into too much detail and just kind of generalizing it for you, Midnight is basically what would happen if Sauron got the One Ring. If the War of the Ring was lost and he just got Frodo. That's not, of course, like, there's no Lord of the Rings in this, and there's no One Ring, but this is basically what would happen, is basically the war for good and evil happened, and good lost. Like, lost cold. So, everything is under this huge oppressive regime. Sauron has these fell beasts, the Nazgul essentially run everything, and it's, or like, not quite like Star Wars, but it's Lord of the Rings, if everything was already conquered, and so you guys, in Midnight, you play heroes who are basically in a hopeless struggle, who are trying to do good things and you might have the urge to try to overthrow the Empire, but you're not going to. This is kind of one of those games where you've already lost, it's just trying to kind of break even. So, and there are victories to be had, but it's almost insurmountable. So that's what Midnight is. It's kind of one of those really dark, I don't want to say emo, but it's like a World of Darkness style RPG where that's the way it is. Like in D&D, there's always like there's tales of great deeds and heroism. In this one, you're kind of doomed heroes, which is it's cool like that. So, where was I? Third edition changed a lot, and so the one thing I wanted to talk to after, again, you know how I get in tangents, but third edition and fourth edition have the same problem that bugs the shit out of me. Well, it has two problems, but the one I want to talk about. Okay, I'll just talk about the first one. The first one is attacks of opportunity. Nobody fucking understands how attacks of opportunities work, and it's not that hard. I've never had a problem with it. I've seen games, I've seen groups that have played for years that don't do attacks of opportunity right. If you don't know what that is, if you're in like close, if I'm fighting you with a sword and we're in sword fighting range, and all of a sudden I decide to like back off or attack somebody else or cast a spell, like so if I try to move away from you and do something else, I'm not devoting my full attention to you, or if I try to cast a spell while I'm in a sword fight, that don't work unless you've got special abilities. So you get what's called an attack of opportunity. You get a free attack against me. And attacks of opportunity are bad news, because you don't want to get hit, of course. So, basically it was if you take any action that's not what's called a double move, which is basically like a retreat, where you're still defending yourself. So if you take any action that is dangerous, like spellcasting or moving and doing something else, you're not devoting your full attention to defense, and you get attacked. Or, if you approach somebody, or try to move past them, if you try to move past them without engaging them in combat, attack of opportunity. So, what the book says is if you try to move through a threatened square, so like around me, I threaten every square around me. So if you try to move through that, I can attack you. Because you can't just run past me. That's stupid. You know, if there's a guy past me, there's a wizard past me and you want to hit him, you can't just run past me and hit him, not without getting at least slashed at first. Otherwise, combat is like this it looks very turn-based, where like, why in real life, why would this guy be able to run past me? I would hit him at least. So so many people misinterpreted this as if you move through a threatened square, as in if you approach me, stop and attack, you have moved through a threatened square and I can attack you. So if you approach and attack, I get to attack you first. That's not how it works. You can move into a square without getting attacked, but you can't move through it. And I guess that's the word through that threw a lot of people off. So I've seen so many games where nobody wanted to approach one another. So like the hero would be like, I move forward and attack. So he gets within melee range and be like, the DM would be like, stop. He gets to attack you first because you moved into a threatened square. And I was like, are you fucking kidding me? And I know there's going to be a couple people who are going to argue this with me. They're like, no, you're reading it wrong. No, I'm not. It's so simple. And there's even examples in the book that point this out. Like, you can approach and attack somebody. It's ridiculous. But yeah, I've seen this group that was like, they used to be like kind of the anchor group of the store next to mine. And I was just kind of looking over what they were doing, and they were doing it wrong. And I'm like, I was like, stop. I was one of those assholes where I was like, stop the game, stop, please, I can't take it. You're doing it wrong. And I go, what do you mean? And I'm like, why would they be able to attack you if you approach them? And they're like, it says in the book. I'm like, what kind of sense does that make? It doesn't, you know. So like, again, there'd be like a thing where the guy would charge. A charge is like if you run towards somebody full bore and attack them, to, you know, make your attack kind of a more berserker style attack. The guy would stop a charge to like, you get attacked first. So like, charge, stop. Then the charge would resume. I was like, it's fucking ridiculous. And so a couple of them would still argue like, that's totally the way a fight would work. If you moved against me, I would hit you first. I was like, read the book. And so, stupid. Attacks of opportunity were one of those things that were like, they were necessary, but they were artificial. Speaking of which, the big problem that was kind of common across 3rd and 4th editions is what's called the Conga line of death. And this would always happen. You might think this doesn't happen all that much. No, in every combat this happens. So, I kind of wish I would... Otherwise, I would show you like an example, but I'll try to illustrate. I think you'll understand what I'm talking about here. I don't have any figures... I might. No, what would I do? Hold them up anyway? So, the Conga line of death. Here's how it works. if I'm attacking you, it's like a fair one-on-one fight. However, if I'm attacking you and one of your friends gets up behind me, directly behind me, so like you're here, I'm here, and then directly behind the fight we're having, that's what's called getting flanked. To where now it's a 2-on-1 fight, it's not fair, and I have to divide my attention fighting the both of you. So I'm like, so that's very hard to do, and there's no getting around that really. Some creatures can't be flanked because they have no distinct front. Like gelatinous cube has no front, so you can't flank one. At least 4th edition, maybe you can. I don't know. I never tried to do it. Never fought a gelatinous cube. But okay, so flanking, what that means is if you're flanking somebody, you get a +2 to hit them because they can't defend as well, right? And if you're flanking somebody or you're helping a rogue or like a thief flank, thieves are very good at backstabbing. So, or it's what's called sneak attack. They made a distinction like assassins can backstab, but thieves sneak attack, whatever. So like if a rogue is flanking you or you're unaware of him, but mainly flanking, you get what's called a sneak attack, which is so much more damage. You get, especially, higher level rogue you are, you get plus 6-sided dice worth of damage. It's crippling. It's huge. So, in 4th edition in particular, they are the DPS role. Unlike MMOs, they have tanks, DPS, healers, stuff like that. And that in 4th edition, that's intentionally what they were trying to do, is make it, at least in terms of being able to relate to new players, like an MMO, because they wanted to get new players in. Totally agree with that. That's fine. And I'm not going on about how DPS is bad, but that rogues are DPS because they do an absurd amount of damage, more so than a fighter most times, but it has to be under that special circumstance. So they do more damage, but only if they're flanking, basically. So flanking is difficult to do, but you always are trying to do it. And so there's leader classes that move pieces against their will or help other pieces move so that you are flanking. That's pretty much their only role, is to move pieces so that they're flanking so you can get the most bonuses possible. Mainly what they do is they're moving the rogue into position because that damage is so huge in the game. And even if you're not a rogue, you want to flank. There's no reason not to flank if you can, because you get a bonus, So, flanking, what would happen is, so let's just draw an imaginary board up here, and this will be easy. So there's me, okay? Me, you, to where we're adjacent, okay? And your friend, so there's a line, okay? You guys are flanking me, okay? So my friend now wants to flank one of you guys. So he moves into position to flank one of you. So it's you, me. Okay, so we're still in a line. Meaning, you two are flanking me, I'm here, your friend is here, and my friend is here. So you're flanking me and my friend are flanking this guy. Okay, so 1, 2, 3, 4. 1 and 3 are flanking 2. 2 and 4 are flanking 3. Got it? So now it's a 2-on-1 fight for me, and it's a 2-on-1 fight for your buddy. Okay, so you two are getting a bonus. My 2 guys are getting a bonus. So what does your friend do? He moves in line behind my guy. So flanking, flanking, flanking. Okay? So now it's 2-on-1 fights all the way. And it's obvious you want to do this. Why would you not want to do this? And so what forms is the Conga line of death. There's no reason not to do it. And it's like a natural extension of the rules because flanking good, And there's no way around this. So at some point you've got normally 5 or 6 players and at least 5 or 6 enemies in most combats. So what happens is I approach you, your friend approaches me, my friend approaches him. There we go. So it was, at first I thought, I even saw this problem ahead of time because I was, me, I think about this shit. So I'm like, why would, and I thought, no, that wouldn't happen because most times, the battlefield is, things are chaotic, you can't necessarily maneuver that well. But it always happens. It would always happen. the conga line would form, and in fact, it got to the point where after the second round, it'd be like my turn, and they would all just go conga dot 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 dot, and every time somebody would move, they would go dot 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 dot, and that's what would it was fucking crazy. And so, how do you get around this? Well, you don't, no, but you can. What you do is you always got to be careful, and this is big in terms of DMing. You want to try to make most fights memorable, even random encounters. And what I mean by that is either have like a unique monster, or have something strange happen, like weird weather, or someone's feeling ill, or there's something strange about their leader. So give one thing at least, or make some monster weird. But what I like to do is make the terrain memorable at least. So there's things called dungeon tiles, which I like a lot. I have a shitload of them because they're very cool. If you can't draw like I can't, you can lay down these little tiles, and the tiles have shapes like terrain, forests, and roads, and things in the way. And so they define like bad terrain, or terrain that's hard to move over, impassable terrain, or even damaging terrain like lava flows or sharp rocks or something like that. Mud that would bog you down, or slippery things that you have to make a check or fall down. So, in most cases, you have to remember that most fights, don't take place in like a big open area. And you're in a big open area, yeah, the conga line is going to form because there's nothing keeping you from doing it. But if you think tactically, there should be terrain, or at least difficult terrain to pass through, okay? So, put some of that in there. Like, if they're in a road, make, like, the center of the road or the sides of the road muddy. So it at least takes, normally it goes, like, 1 square per, to move to a square, it costs 1 square of movement, obviously. But moving through rough terrain takes 2. So, like, every rough terrain square, it takes 2 squares of movement. Or you can have them make a dexterity check or fall, or have to make a jump check, like put like a fence, like maybe the archers are behind a fence, the enemy archers, and so they have to jump the fence to get to them. So that's like a jump check to get over. A simple one, but one they still have to make. So like jumping a fence is like a 7 or an 8. Unless they fuck it up, which they may, they fall down, or at least say it takes 2 squares to get over if they take their time or something like that. So remember that when you're in a dungeon, have stuff in the way. Have piles of rubble, or have, I don't want to say lava flows, but have like even traps, like really like little flame gouts that periodically spray from the walls, or caltrips. Like maybe do this especially in dungeons where the monsters in there, if they're intelligent, know that they might get invaded. So have them set up traps, or at least difficult things like a palisade, or those fences with like the logs sticking out to where you can't approach them, or they intentionally create like, what a murder hole is. A murder hole is when you're passing through a castle gate, there's little holes in the front, in the top, or even the bottom sometimes, where if you try to pass through, some asshole above you is just ramming a spear down to where you can't hit him, but he can hit you because you're passing through the fucking gate. And so that's what a murder hole is. Or they're behind like a crenellation, those on a castle where like the walls kind of do this little pattern. That's crenellation. Or an archer slot, which is those little slots in the wall, basically just big enough for an archer to stick his bow out and go poing, and he hides. So that's what's called 9/10 cover in 3rd edition, or superior cover in later ones. So where like there's like 1/10 of the guy showing, and a crenellation is like 50%. So put the guys behind cover. Put rough terrain or impassable terrain, something that they can put their backs to, because if you were in a fight, or if I was in a fight, I wouldn't want to let somebody get behind me. I would put my back to a wall. So, or I would try to be a little more smart about it. I'd try to put something behind me, or put next to someone, or stand as... This is a big thing, and a lot of people do this. They cowboy out on their own to where they're in a position to get flanked. Whereas sometimes you should kind of stick together, or at least kind of put a little bit of distance in between you, like even a square or 2 squares, to the point where trying to get in between you would be a very stupid move, because then they'd have to pass through your threatened square, and then they get fucked up. So don't, if you're aware of this, be smart and don't let it happen. For in so many cases where it usually is like one character rushes out. It happens a lot when initiative is staggered. So like you roll initiative, and sometimes if it happens that it's hero monster, then the conga line forms because one guy runs out, the other guy runs out, and so on. If it might be more advisable to kind of move forward as a group on the same or at least close initiative, so you're not in that position. But the thing is, the reason that doesn't always work is because you want to flank, and so you have to go out on your own. You know what I mean? So it can be done, but you have to try to do it that way. So sometimes flanking is not the best idea, but in the case of the rogue, it always is. You know what I mean? So it's one of those problems that can be mitigated, but not entirely solved. It's one of those artificial rules that it has to be there. Well, something like that has to be there because you want to do. They can't do facing. Facing is like you have to define which way your character is facing. So D&D, the old school AD&D used to do that, where you didn't have to, but you could define where your front was. And so where this got really crazy was your front. Okay, this is my front, duh. But like, if you're behind me, I don't get dexterity because I can't see you, I can't dodge you, or at least if I'm dodging, I'm guessing, so I don't get dex. And if I have a shield front, and if I'm carrying my shield, okay, I'm right-handed, my left hand, if you're attacking from my left, I get my shield, or I get all of my shield. From the front, I may not get all of it. From my right, if you're right here, I don't get my shield, so my AC is lower from here, lowest over here. You know, so my strongest AC is front, and it's so fucking. I mean, once you get the hang of it, you can keep track of it, but it's one of those things where you're like, let's just get through the fucking combat and do this. It's okay to abstract it. 3rd and 4th edition abstract the hell out of it, where it's assumed that if you're in front of a guy, you're facing him. So then that's what they do flanking for. So I'm stating the extremely obvious, but what I mean is, it's good that it's there, and at the same time, it mechanically causes these problems. So the best way around this, if there is a way around this, is to put difficult terrain in there, which happens. So like even if you're in a bar, I've seen fights in taverns that are just like, oh, there's a wide open area here. Put tables, put chairs down, and even put like you can even mark where like chandeliers are, and in a way that will inspire characters because there's all sorts of stuff you can do if there's things to stand on or ropes to swing on, and then you start having some fun. Like my bard would, swing on a rope, or there are bonuses for having higher ground. So one of the guys might, I stand on the table and I start swinging down on guys like that, and so you could say like maybe you can't be flanked as easily, or at least you get less of a bonus flanking if you're on a table, or have guys hide behind things. Archery is one of those things that's really underrated. For some reason, a lot of DMs don't like to do, guys hiding, and they don't. They always like to do things where enemies are very single-minded, where they will always run forward and attack, and groups will always fight to the death. Especially for even cowardly monsters, for some reason, will fight to the death, and that's why they have. In AD&D, I'm not sure if they have them later on, I forget, morale checks, to where if they lose their leader, they have to check morale. If they fail, they'll run, or they'll do their best to disengage, or they'll surrender. So this will happen if they lose their leader, if they lose 25%, 50%, and so on. To where if they have really strong morale, sometimes they will fight to the last man, and some characters or monsters have really unshakable morale. So if they're military, they'll check morale much less. Or if they fail morale, that doesn't necessarily mean they tuck tail and run, pissing themselves. Like if you had a regiment of soldiers that failed morale, they would retrograde advance. They'd be like, we need to regroup, and so that's what a morale check would be. But a lot of DMs do this, where like monster sees heroes, monsters run forward and attack, which they may not always do, especially if you're one of the weaker races. Kobolds are always kind of the big joke in AD&D because they have like no hit points. So kobolds, there's even a game called Kobolds Ate My Baby, where the whole joke is that kobolds, a stiff wind will kill them. So one of my first things I always wanted to do was make kobolds, if not like a really menacing threat, a definitely annoying and damaging one. So kobolds are stupid and they're weak, but at least they kind of know they're stupid and weak, you know? So at least they'll put some effort into, if they have to get into a fight, they'll make fucking sure they'll have the numbers advantage, because that's what they have, is a big numbers advantage. And if they're fighting on their home turf, which they're often forced to do because adventurers always kicking their fucking door down, they'll make their turf as hostile as possible. They'll put caltrops down, they'll put pit traps down. Maybe really easily evaded and seen, but they'll put them down because, I mean, even they understand the importance of a bottleneck, you know, to funnel them in single file so they can stab you. They might even build murder holes in They'll might even build murder holes so they can spear you. Or they'll hide behind things so they can chuck javelins at you. Which is why, in 4th edition, I guess one of the smarter things they did was they invented what's called skirmishers. Skirmishers are guys who essentially open up the fight by throwing a volley of spears or javelins at you to kind of soften you up a little bit. That's how military engagements used to go, like in Roman times. They had hoplites, I think they were, that would throw spears. So skirmishers are kind of those ranged guys, to where they have like one or two shots and then they close to melee, or they'll retreat and let the warriors move in. So that's what kobolds and goblins are very good at, is kind of hit and fade attacks or maneuvering, numbers advantage. So make sure that when you're DMing, they do that, to where especially mobility is their big advantage. You'll notice goblins, if in 4th edition, have this thing where let's call it like goblin evasion or something like that, to where they can move, and they're really annoying about that, to where they move into flanking position, and again the conga line forms. But that's what they do. So remember, and I've probably gone on about this before, remember that creatures are intelligent. Kobolds less intelligent than others, but unless they're animals, or unless they're like undead or constructs, pardon me, unless they're completely mindless, and even animals will run. You know, you kick a dog, it will either fight, or if you kick it enough, it will run. Don't kick my dog. So monsters, at least remember that if they're losing the fight, at least let them bear in mind that they may realize they're losing the fight and may do something to about this, or at least to regroup or sound an alarm or something like that. So if you were, let's say you're one of the goblins, and let's face it, as a goblin you're used to retreating, you know, so have a plan in place to do that. And they don't always necessarily want to eat an attack of opportunity, okay? So have them have some plan to get away. There's a lot of things I would like to do, is if they have a spellcaster, which they sometimes do, have them cast Obscuring Mist, or, you know, kind of, or what's called a smoke stick. That's like an alchemical thing that, it's like a ninja bomb. You throw it down, you know, smoke, or Obscuring Mist, or a Tanglefoot bag, something they can throw in your face, like even sand. Having them have it's silly, but if it hits, is memorable. It pisses the characters off. You threw fucking sand in my face, and he's like, yeah, he runs away. So give them an opportunity. If they feel they're outclassed, don't have them run forward like idiots and get slaughtered. Have them move to a more advantageous position and have a more advantageous, like, even stupid monsters will have some kind of fallback post. They'll know that they fight better on their home turf, and give them a reason why fighting on their home turf is preferable. You know, sometimes they may even have like explosives or guards on duty that are specifically armed to kind of do hit and fades. So there's other things that you can do other than necessarily going to flank. And so that's the biggest thing I would encourage you to do, is remember monster intelligence, and remember that you can put dangerous and damaging terrain, or just difficult to traverse terrain. And you'll notice when you go into dungeons, these places kind of lend themselves to things like that. So if you're in a dungeon, think about the kind of stuff that's in a dungeon, even if it's like cracks in the floor, or like, say, when I was in Ireland, there's very rough terrain where it's like stones. It's almost like cobblestones, but imagine cobblestones if between the stones there were like 2-foot jagged creases in between the stones. Perfect for getting your ankle stuck in and snapping it off at the shin. It's like it seriously is the most dangerous terrain I have ever seen in my life, short of like open magma streams, you know? So, seriously, if you haven't seen it, it has a specific name, and I can't remember what it is, but because you have these stones with these jagged fucking cracks in between them. If you step on them, you are certain to break your ankle. I fucking guarantee it, which happens a lot. And the real bad thing is these rocks, since it always pisses rain in Ireland, these rocks are always wet and slick. So if you're not watching where you're going, even if you step on one of the rocks, if you're not extraordinarily careful, you'll slip, your foot goes into the foot into the crevice, and you snap your fucking... It's so dangerous. So do that. Have really dank, moist, damp caves with those little cracks in it. Or just say the rock is really smooth and it's wet. So if you try to move around and you don't have, like... If you don't have boots on, or if you don't... Even if you have, like, boots on, it's really slick and you may fall. Have slopes. So, like, or slopes that they may have to run uphill, which is very difficult to do, or run downhill, which is very easy to do. Stuff like that. Dangerous, like, fungus, or, you know how in, you remember Ultima 8 when you had the exploding mushrooms, which were bullshit, but you could do that, because in D&D it's justifiable, or at least have mushrooms that, if you step on them, release like a noxious cloud of pollen that either blinds you or may cause coughing fits or nausea. There's a lot of conditions in these books called like nausea, blindness, deafness. There's different levels of nausea, like sickness to the point where you're just abjectly throwing up, or it may even poison you inhaling these spores. There's also what are called screamer mushrooms that I remember very, very well from AD&D, where if you step on them, they make a horrible screeching noise, or if you even disturb them in any way, which alerts everything in the cave, which is why a lot of goblins and monsters will intentionally plant or cultivate screamer mushrooms in there, so do that. I especially like the mushrooms, or they even have fungi in the books are especially dangerous, molds and fungi, because they're not just like your standard kind of mold or moss. These things are so deadly. They're incredibly deadly, and I don't even know if they do them in 4th, or at least not to the level. They would fucking kill you in AD&D. So do that. Have paths of fungus or mushrooms or molds, or even little streams of water that may have things in them, like maybe say there's like a snake or some deadly fish in there, so if they run through it, they don't know what's in there. Or even like really shitty diarrhea water that we've talked about this, to where they, maybe the goblins don't care because they're already sick, or they wallow in their own shit anyway, and so to get them, you gotta step in this fucking water, or stuff like that. So, or what especially pisses players off, and I love this, is to have little towers that, especially outside, if you're trying to raid a brigand's post, they're not going to just engage you in an open field. They'll have little archery towers or things they can throw shit down at you, and the only way to get them is to either shoot them or climb up, and good luck with that, So, it's ranged combat especially is where I find a lot of player characters get really frustrated, and that should be the case. You're not trying to be a hard ass. You're not trying to screw them, is what I mean. And so by giving them realistic engagements like that, as realistic as one gets when it comes to exploding mushrooms, that makes it more memorable, and it makes them think smarter. They're less likely to run forward. And I guess my last piece of advice when it comes to avoiding the conga line is to punish the cowboys. By that I mean, if there's a guy who runs forward on his own to do something stupid, he thinks he's so badass, like the fighter or the barbarian. I mean, I guess that's what they do, but they need to be smarter about it. If they just run right into the middle of them, punish the shit out of them. You need to make them realize that they're working as a group, and if they're not working as a group, they're gonna get picked off, because especially the weaker races, like the goblins and shit like that, will tend to wolfpack people. Wolfpacking is they'll find the weakest guy they can find, surround him, mob him, and kill him first. So, or they'll find the most dangerous guy. So, that's why I don't remember if I've done a video on this, but in fact I probably haven't. I'll just give it to you. Never dress like a wizard. Never. Because if you dress like a wizard, it's a bullseye right here. Never dress like one. So, if you're dressed like one, intelligent and dumb creatures will recognize that that's the asshole throwing spells, and they'll mob you if they can. If not, they'll either, depending on what they're thinking of, they'll either mob the weakest guy or the strongest guy, because they're like, we got to take this guy down first, or well, we have to drop this guy because he's healing them. Whatever is the most irritating guy at that point, they'll wolf pack that guy. And so the player might whine that you're picking on them, and it's not because you're trying to kill them as a DM, it's because these guys would wolf pack you, you know? But don't do that. Don't pick on them, but like, there's a time when you're picking on them, and there's a time when you're rightfully punishing them for being stupid, if that makes sense. So if it seems like a lot of times, if you've seen me DM at all, if it seems like I'm a hard ass about this, I am, but I don't think I'm being unfair. I don't think I'm being one of those killer DMs. Specifically because of that reason. Is because if they're being dumb, I punish them for being dumb, but I do it fairly. So, that's my last advice. Does it fix the conga line, any of this? Not really. You can try to mitigate it, like I said, but that's the best you can do. If there's a reason not to play 4th edition, and there are many, 3rd and 4th edition, it's because of that. Other games, I think, handle it a little more elegantly. And the reason I think a lot of people don't like 3rd and 4th is because it changed it from an RPG to a miniatures war game. A good one, but it's less about role playing as much as it is really kind of well-defined but approachable combat. And that, in that regard, is very well done. In fact, they basically just kind of said fuck the RPG at one point. They've released this game called Dungeon Command D&D Miniatures, specifically called D&D Miniatures, which are literally just the miniatures war game. Nothing but. So, it's a little more balanced. There's point values and stuff like that, but that's what it's become. And I mean, it is an RPG. There's, of course, the RPG elements are there, and maybe even arguably better defined than they were in these games. But it is noticeably different, and the emphasis has radically shifted over to miniatures war games, which is why a lot of people don't like them. I have my own reasons, but again, I'll whine about that later. So, Conga Line of Death. Very few ways around it. Until next time.